Hello Divination and welcome. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you step by step how to create elegant split image product info sections with Divi. This is the final result we're aiming to achieve. So without wasting a lot of time, let's dive in and let's get started. All right, everyone. So right now I'm in my WordPress admin dashboard. So the first thing we need to do is to create a brand new page. So I'm going to come over here, click on add new. So we can call this page whatever we want. So I'm just going to call this split, because this is the split image tutorial. I'm going to click now on use Divi Builder. Now, before I continue, the images that I'm going to use in this tutorial can be found in the link which I'll add in the video description. All right, so let's start building by clicking here on build from scratch. And then I'm just going to close this for now. And let's start working on our background. So I'm going to click here on this gear icon and we're going to go to the background. And we're going to add a gradient here. So I'm going to click here on the second tab, click on the plus button, and let's add our first color. Now, the colors are also I'm going to use here can be found in the post, which I'll link to in the show notes below. All right, so now let's add our second color. So again, I'm going to paste it in here. And for our gradient direction, we're going to set this to 90 degrees. And then we are going to set our start and end position to 50% and 50% over here. Now let's add our top padding. So I'm going to click here on this design tab, click on spacing. So our top padding is going to be 5 VW and our bottom padding here is going to be 12 VW. Next, we need to go to visibility by coming over here to advanced, click on visibility. And here we need to make sure our horizontal and vertical overflow is set to hidden. So I'm going to select hidden and then we're going to save. Next, we're going to add our column structure. So I'm going to click on this plus button and we need 2 equal columns. So I'm going to select this. And before we add any modules, I'm just going to close this and let's do a bit of work here in our settings. So I'm going to click on my row settings and over here, we're going to go into the design, sizing, and set our gutter width. So I'm going to activate my gutter width here and set this to 2. Now the gutter width is the space between the 2 columns. Next, we're going to make sure our width is set to 100% and also on our maximum width. Next, let's go to spacing and we need to add our top and bottom padding and we're going to set this to 2 VW, and notice that I'm using this chain icon to make sure my value is added both to the top and the bottom. Now we need to go to our column settings because we need to do a few adjustments there as well. So I'm going to click here on the content and then we're going to go to column 1 settings. I'm going to click on design and then all the way down here to transform, we're going to go to transform translate, and over here we need to set our y-axis. So I am going to disable this chain first and set our y-axis to -2 VW. Next, we are going to go to our column 2 settings. So I'm going to go back over here, click on second column settings, design, transform. And then we also need to go into transform translate. And here we're going to break the chain and set this now to 2 VW. So pretty much we're done here. I'm going to save this and save it one more time. Now let's start by adding all our text modules. So I'm going to click here on this plus button. And you know what? If you don't have access to it, you can use the layers icon here. So anyway, now I'm going to search for my text module and select it. And all I'm going to add here is just text that says live, and we are going to set this to heading 2. Now let's stylize this text by coming over here to design. I'm going to go to heading text, heading 2, and for our font, we're going to go with Corbin. So I'm going to search for it and select it. So for our alignment, I'm going to keep it left, but for our phone and tablet, we're going to center it. So I'm going to click here on this icon and we're going to center it for our phone. And then I'm going to go to my tablet as well and center it. All right, great. So now that I have that all set, the next stage now is to add our text color. So for this, we are going to go with a dark gray. So I'm going to come all the way down here and then click on this eyedropper tool and paste my color in here. Now, as I mentioned, if you want to use the exact same colors, I'm going to leave a link to the post in the show notes below. All right, so moving on, let's set our heading 2 text size. So here we're going to set this to 7 VW. So we want it nice and big, but of course, this is going to be way too small for our mobile and phone views. So I'm going to click here and go to our tablet. And here we're going to set it to 16 VW. And then on the phone, we're going to do the same. Make sure it's set to 16 VW. Right, so moving on, the next stage is to go to our spacing. So I'm going to set some margins and some padding. So let's start with our margins. So I'm going to go all the way down here, click on spacing. And for our margin, right, I'm going to set this to -1 VW. And then on the tablet and the phone, we are going to set this to 0. And I'm going to do the same here for the phone as well. And over here on the padding, let's head over to our tablet and phone, and we're going to make sure that the right padding here as well is going to be 35 VW, and it needs to be the same for the phone, but we don't need to add any settings for the desktop. All right, so now that we've added all this, the next stage is to add another text module, and this time it's going to go to column 2. So I'm going to save this. And we are going to click on this plus button, search for my text module and select it. And the text we need here just says, well, and we're going to set this to heading 2. Now let's stylize this by coming over here to the design, heading text, making sure you're on heading 2. So our font here is going to be Corbin, and we're also going to set our size here. So in fact, before we add our size, let's go to our alignment, and we want to make sure that this is aligned left. And then we're going to go into our tablet, align it center, and phone center as well. So now that we have that in place, the next stage is to, in fact, you know what? Over here on the alignment, let's go into the tablet one more time. So this needs to be aligned to the right. Okay, sorry about that. So the phone needs to be also aligned to the right. Now it's time to add our color. So I'm going to click on the eyedropper tool and paste my color in here. Next, we're going to add our size. So this again is going to be the same size. And we're going to set this to 7 VW. In fact, I need to make sure I'm on the right tab here. So the desktop is going to be 7 VW. And then my phone and tablet needs to be 14. So I'm going to add my 14 VW here. Do the same here as well. All right, so now that I have my values in place, it's time now to adjust our spacing. So I'm going to come all the way down here to spacing. So the first thing I need to do is to add my top margin, and this is going to be -12 VW, but this is only going on the tablet. So I'm going to make sure I'm in the tablet tab, and on the phone, this needs to be set to -12 as well. Okay, great. Next, we need to add our left margin. So I'm going to go back over here to my desktop. So for my margin left, I'm going to set this to -0.5 VW. And for my right padding, and this is only for the tablet and the phone. So it's going to make sure I go into the right tablet here. And here we need to set this to 17 VW. There we go. So now you can see it is well laid out. All right, great. So now that I have all this set, we need to add our second row. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to click here on this plus button to add my second row. So we are going to go with 2 equal columns as well. I'm going to close this, and then we're going to go into our row settings. So in our row settings, I'm going to click here on design, sizing. I'm going to activate use custom gutter width, and because we're going to be adding images and we want them close to each other, we want to reduce the space between the columns by dragging this all the way down to 0 for this. And then we want to equalize the column heights and then set our width to 100%. So currently it's set at 80, make sure it's set to 100. And over here on the maximum width as well, we're going to set that to 100%. All right, so now that we have this all set, the next stage now is to head over to the spacing. So I'm going to go all the way down here and click on spacing. So here we need to add our top margin, and this is going to be -15 VW. Next, we're going to add our top and bottom padding. So that's going to be 0 VW. So I'm going to set it here, and making sure it's on both on the top and the bottom. Now we want these images to be next to each other on on all the different devices. So I'm going to come over here to advanced, custom CSS, and then on the main element, we're going to just use this CSS code snippet. So this just says display flex. Right. So if you want to use the exact same CSS code, you can find it on the post that I'll link to in the show notes below. All right. So moving on, let's add our image to column 1. So I'm going to come over here now. And in fact, as you can see, I don't have access to this. So I'm just going to go to my wireframe mode. And here in my second row, I'm going to click here and add my image. So I'm just going to search for my image here, select it, and I'm going to switch back over to my front end. Right, so now it's time to add our image. So I'm going to click on this plus button, and the image I'm going to go with is, so I'm going to go with my first split image here, and notice the size is 961 by 1200. So if you're going to be doing that, make sure you use that size. So I'm going to click upload an image. Now, while we're here, we also have a second version of this image, and this is going to be used on the tablet and phone. So I'm going to click here on the tablet, and then I'm going to go in and change the image and use this one here. And notice that the size is different. This is 600 by 1200. So I'm going to say upload an image, and I'm going to go into the phone as well and do the same. So this is just a smaller version of the image. So as you can see here, this fits in very well. All right, great. So now that we have our image there, we're going to go back over here. In fact, we need to force full width. So I'm going to click here on design, sizing, and make sure you force full width. So that setting is very important. So next we're going to do the same. We're also going to add an image over here to the right. So I'm going to click here on this plus button, search for image, and select it. And then I'm going to look for my image, and I'm going to go with this one here. In fact, we need the bigger one, 960 by 1200. Click upload an image, and you can see here it fits perfectly in place. Now, before we move away from this, as we did before, we need to add the right size for the desktop. So as you can see here, now that I've switched, it doesn't look right. So this is why we need to go in and use the second version. And this one here is slightly smaller. It's 600 by 1200. So I'm going to say upload an image, and now it looks great in the phone and the tablet. All right, great. So now that we have all our images in place, we also need to go into design, sizing, and force full width. Now that is very, very important. Let's save this, and let's go ahead now and add our third row. So I'm going to click here on this plus button, add 2 columns. So I'm just going to close this for now because we need to go into our row settings. So I'm going to click here on this gear icon, and we're going to go into design, sizing, and use custom gutter width. This time I'm going to set this to 4, and we're also going to set our width. So I'm going to come over here and set this to 100% and 100% for the maximum width as well. Now let's go to spacing, and here we need to set our margins. So I'm going to start with my top margin and set it at -38 VW. And then I'm going to go to my column 1 settings, and here I'm going to add a left padding. So to do that, I need to come over here to design, and then I want to click on spacing. So our left padding here is going to be 7 VW, and our right padding is going to be 15 VW. So I'm going to add it here. All right, so now that I've added my values to both sides, the next stage is to go to column 2. So I'm going to go back over here, click on column 2 settings, and we're going to go to design, spacing. And here we're going to add our left padding, and this is going to be 15 VW. And then I'm going to go to the right padding and set this to 7 VW. So pretty much that's all we need to do here. I'm going to save this one more time. And now it's time to add our modules. So you know what? I'm going to go back over here to wireframe mode, click on this plus button to add my text module. So I'm going to search for it and select it. So here we're going to call this organic produce. But you know what? You can use pretty much any text here. It doesn't have to be the same text or wording that I'm using. So this could be a totally different design for you. So before we continue, in fact, you know what? Let's just switch over here to the front end so we can see what we're doing. So that's my text there, organic produce. So I'm going to highlight it and set this to heading 3. And now let's go in and customize this. So I'm going to click here on design, heading text, heading 3. So first of all, I'm going to add my color in here. In fact, my color needs to go into the background of this. So let's go to background and make sure you're on content. So here on the background, I'm going to click on this plus button and add this really dark gray. Now I'm going to go to my title text. So because as you can see, you can't read the text now. So I'm going to go to design, heading text, and we are going to change this color to an white or just an off-white. So now you can see it's visible and we can now see it. Next, we are going to add a custom font to this. So I'm going to click here on this drop down and choose Corbin, just to make sure that we're consistent with the fonts that we're using throughout this. Next, we're going to center this, and in fact, we have our color already, so that's great. And we're also going to set our size, and we're going to set this to 2.2 VW. Next, we're going to add some letter spacing, and here we're going to set this to 3 pixels. Now it's time to give this some breathing space by adding some padding. So I'm going to come over here to spacing, and on our padding, I'm going to set this to 0.2, and that needs to go to the top, and then the bottom needs to be 0.5. So as you can see, as I'm entering that, this is starting to look great. Now, we also need to add some rounded corners to this. So I'm going to come over here to border, and making sure your chain icon here is activated, I'm going to set 1 VW to all corners, and now you can see my rounded corners have been applied to all the sides. I'm going to save this, and you know what? We need to duplicate this because we need to have a similar one over there to the right. So I'm just going to hover over it. In fact, I'm not sure why this is not working, but anyways, I can always come over here to my wireframe mode, duplicate it, and then drag it over here to the right column, and then switch back over here. Right, so let's continue this design, and let's add our call to action. So I'm going to come back over here and click on this plus button, and I'm going to add my call to action. So I'm going to search for it and select it. I'm going to switch over here so we can see what we're working on, and now we can add all our text. So here on the title, you can say fresh fruit and veg, and we also need to add some description text in here. And for our button to show, you can just say order a basket. Right, so as you can see, it's not showing here. So for the button to show in our call to action module, you need to come over here to link and give this a button URL. So I'm just going to add a blank one here. So now you can see my button is now showing. Okay, so now let's continue and further customize this. So we need to add a background color to this. So I'm going to come over here to background, and we are going to set this to an off-white color. Now let's go to the design tab and let's work on our title text. So here you can see I've set my set to heading 2. So we're going to set our color here to a very dark gray so we can read it on this white or off-white background. And our font here is going to be Open Sans. So I'm going to search for it. There we go. So that's going to be our font. Next, we're going to set our size, and this is going to be 1.4 VW. And we're also going to add some letter spacing, and this is going to be 2 pixels. And our line height is going to be 1.5. Next, we need to go into our body text. So I'm going to click here on this brush tool, and let's start by adding our color here because we can't see the text that we're working with. Next, I'm going to add Open Sans as my font here. And now I'm going to adjust my size, and I'm going to set this to 0.9 VW. And our line height is going to be 1.8. Now, while we're here, we might as well style our button as well. So I'm going to click here on this brush tool, and style our button, you need to activate use custom styles for button. So first of all, we're going to set our text size for our button, and this is going to be 1 VW. And then we're also going to add our color, that dark gray that we've used before. So that's going to be our button text color. So I'm going to go in and add my color in here. So now you can see our button is coming to life. Right, so for the border width, we are going to make sure this is set to 1 pixel, because currently it's set to 2. Okay, so that's much better because 2 is a bit too thick. Now we need to add our button border color. So I'm going to add that gray color there. So the next stage now is to add our button border radius. Add my radius in there. So moving on, I'm going to add some custom padding here to the top. So I'm going to come over all the way down here to my top margin, and I'm going to set this to -2 VW, just so that it's slightly closer to our paragraph text over there. All right, so pretty much our design here is looking great. So what we're going to do next is we're going to come all the way down here to our border, and we are going to add 1 VW to all the sides, so we could give it some rounded corners. And we're also going to add our border width, and we're going to set this to 1, so that our border here shows. And we also need to adjust our color, so we're going to go with a dark gray, and in fact that's the one that's there by default, so I'm going to leave it as it is. So what you can do here, I mean, this button here, we can leave it as it is, or we can go in and give it a color. But you know what? I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. And then what you need to do is to save this and duplicate this and drag it over to the right, because it's pretty much going to be the same design. So this needs to be in the right area. In fact, you know what? If you're finding it difficult to get it in the right place, you can just come over here to wireframe mode and then just make sure you drag it under the text. So now let's switch back over here, and you can see now it's in the right position. So here, what you can also do is to remove the borders of this if you need to. So or the background as well. So I'm going to go back in here, and I'm just going to come to the background and get rid of the background there. Now you could go with this style here where you have this this border, but of course if you want to get rid of it altogether, you can just come over here to design, border, and we can just remove it like that. So all you have now is just the text. You can also apply the same thing over here as well. If you want to get rid of the border, you can just go into the settings and get rid of the border. So pretty much this is our final design. Let's take a look at it now after publishing it. So there we go. This is our final design. So there you have it. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and do follow us on our social media platforms. By doing so, you'll be notified every time we release new tutorials. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.